Every year on the fourth Sunday of Easter, we hear from the Gospel of John. We hear the same readings in all three different of the yearly cycles that is about the Good Shepherd. And as such, the fourth Sunday of Easter often gets the nickname as Good Shepherd Sunday. It also has become, because of that, the World Day of Prayer for Vocations. And so part of our focus today is praying for God to call people into the vineyard, right, to come and be co-workers with Him and be able to do His ministry within the church and for the world. And so we do pray for vocations to priesthood, religious life, to the diaconate, to all kinds of different ways of service, and it calls us to ask the question, God, what are you calling me to do? Right? It opens up our hearts in the same way to be able to see where God may be leading each of us in relationship with Him and in service to others. But in the gospel reading, we hear about the Good Shepherd. So in John chapter 10, which this comes from, John chapter 10 actually is called the Good Shepherd Discourse. But the first part of the chapter we don't hear today, and in that part of the chapter is when Jesus says He is the gate. So you might recall that He says He's the gate and also the shepherd. But as the gate, He says, the thief, you may remember this, the thief comes only to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. And we also hear in that first section about Jesus saying that the sheep know His voice, right? And so we've talked about those things some in the past when those readings have come up. Today we hear two applications of another parable about Jesus being the Good Shepherd. Both of those is introduced with the title, I am the Good Shepherd, and then He kind of goes on to say that He lays down His life for His sheep. And the first application of that is that He defends the sheep, right? The sheep are powerless. The sheep are in need of protection because of the wolves. And so the wolves in Jesus' time, or in the time that the Gospel of John was written, really were an image or a symbol of false teachers. They were someone that came in trying to lead people astray from the gospel truth of what Jesus had taught, leading them away from being disciples of Jesus. And so there is a role for the Good Shepherd to play in helping people to find the truth and to walk in that truth, right? And to protect them from those who would seek to pull them down. You may recognize that the mercenary shepherds aren't any good. They're just in it for their own self-interest, right? So that's the kind of the contrast. Jesus is going to lay down His life for the good of the sheep. The second application is that Jesus knows His sheep and His sheep know Him, right? So there's a knowledge, a relationship. He compares it to how God knows the Son, and the Son, God the Father, and the Son knows the Father. That intimate of a relationship that Jesus has with each of the members of His flock. And so for you and for me, that means Jesus knows you. He knows you by name. You're not part of a mass of people or a multitude. You are an individual in God's eyes. God cares for you. He sees into the secret recesses of your heart. He opens up your conscience. I heard this the other day. He kind of opens the tabernacle of your soul, right? To kind of get in and see who you are. And because He sees you as you are, God loves you. He loves His sheep. He lays down His life for His sheep. Now, as it's World Prayer Day for Vocations, I thought I would share part of my vocation story with you. A very small part. Just one thing, in fact, just an impetus that was part of the call for me. Because when I felt like God was calling me to priesthood, the image that I got for that was being a pastor. That's what my heart has always kind of been set on. That's where I believe God was forming me for and calling me to do, was to be a pastor. And pastor comes from the Latin word for shepherd. And so this resonates to me. But Jesus, the Good Shepherd, in that call and that image, always felt like it was a call to an expansion of my heart. Right? Being a shepherd, to lay down one's life for the sheep, is broadening the horizon of concern, of care, of opening up my heart to the needs of others, to walking in compassion and trying to edify and build up others, right? And so it challenges me to be better, to love more fully and more completely, to walk like Jesus walked, to be the Good Shepherd like Jesus was the Good Shepherd. Now, I've been a pastor quite a while, and many times, and in a couple places, and I was ordained about a year and a half when I was named a pastor. And then 2 months later, the Archbishop called me and asked me to also be the Associate Vocation Director. So, in my entire 20-plus years of priesthood now, I've had 2 months where I was just a pastor. God works in mysterious ways. But we're called to also follow the Good Shepherd. I've never particularly liked the analogy of us being the sheep. Right? I've thought about sheep as kind of being dumb animals. I've always had a little bit of an edge with that. Now, I was set straight after the last Mass, and someone who owns 50 sheep said, they're very intelligent. Who knew? So, but that there is a role for us to understand docility to the Spirit, of responsiveness to Jesus' voice. And so there is an image of the flock and of the sheep that may be beneficial for us. But I think that the parables are really more about who Jesus is and less about who we are. They're about Jesus who lays down his life for his sheep. And in fact, each of us are called to emulate the Good Shepherd. As pastor of St. Pat's, this is sort of an outdated maybe, but it's a sociological number. I feel like I can effectively, personally pastor about 250 people. Like that's about the limit of what my personal capacity for in-depth relationship and knowledge and ability to track and keep up with people and be able to assist and help them, right? So it's kind of a limited thing. So I know that. So I've communicated with our staff, each members of our staff, Deacon Scott, all the deacons, the associate pastor, all of those who are on staff. Like you also have to be pastoring. Like you also have to be caring for the sheep. You have to be laying down your life for them. You've got to be in service to them. You have a particular sphere of influence, and that sphere of influence is the relationships that you have with folks in the parish. And so you need to know their needs. You need to know who they are. You need to work with them and for them and through them sometimes, but you need to do that. Also, if you are in a leadership role in our parish community, so if you are part of a ministry or you're doing something else, you too are a way that God shepherds his people in our community, right? You are someone who God works through to care for those that are in your sphere of influence, that you are called to be a good shepherd, to lay down your life for those who are on your ministry teams or those who you minister to and with. And so God uses you as well. But it goes beyond that. It's really each of us, with all of our spheres of influences, called to be like the Good Shepherd. Each of us in our homes with our families, each of us in our workplaces, each of us in the relationships that we have, in the volunteer work that we do, in the social activities we're engaged in, that we connect with people and we lay down our lives like the Good Shepherd does in service to others. It can be a daily thing and a very small thing or a big thing, right? But we're called to have the heart of a good shepherd. Part of the Eucharist and part of the mystery we celebrate, and I talked about this with our first communicants yesterday, is a divine exchange, right? We come here to the altar and we offer our lives on the altar to God. We can offer our hearts on the altar to God. We can make a specific intention and offer that to God. God takes that, blesses it, breaks it, and he gives us himself. He gives us his life. And so as we come here with hearts that maybe need to be formed more in the image of the Good Shepherd, in the image of being willing to protect and reach out to those, to get to know those who are in need and be able to lay down our lives for others selflessly, we come here to receive Christ's life in us, that we may be inspired by the Eucharist we receive to walk more like Jesus the Good Shepherd, that we may be transformed by the Eucharist we receive to walk more like Jesus the Good Shepherd, and that we may be guided by the Eucharist we receive to walk more like Jesus, who is the Good Shepherd.